الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Welcome to Understanding Islam. This week we're going to look at the practice of fasting in Islam. Many people know the word Ramadan and they associate this with the practice of fasting. But actually, Ramadan is the name of a month. It's the 9th month in the Arab calendar, which becomes the calendar of Islam. Like all those ancient calendars, the Islamic calendar is lunar. It operates according to the phases of the moon. So, new moon, new month. Now, the thing about a lunar calendar is that a lunar month is actually 29.5 days long. So in practice, lunar months are either 29 or 30 days. Which it is depends on when you can sight the new moon. So you go out at the end of the 29th day and see if you can sight the moon or not. If you can, tomorrow is the first of the new month. If you can't, then tomorrow is the 30th of the present month, and automatically the day after that will be the first of the new month. Now, this leads us to all sorts of practical problems, as you can imagine. In one village, they sight the new moon. In another village, they don't. So you can have variations in the start and the end of months. In a country with a lot of cloud and light pollution, it's almost impossible to see the new moon. And so then you either have to go by astronomical data or you have to take the sighting from somewhere else. And then you can imagine that the scholars then have different opinions on this question. Should we take it from the same country, but national boundaries are arbitrary? Should we take it from the same landmass? Or should we take it from the same hemisphere? All sorts of differences in this practice mean that you can have Ramadan starting and ending on different days. That is the way it is until there can be some unification of the question of moon sighting and the starting and the ending of each month. The fasting of Ramadan is something ordained by God. The Quran tells us that earlier revelations, the people were also commanded to fast as well. So it seems to be a human practice to fast, not just an Islamic practice. The Islamic fast during the month of Ramadan is a daylight fast. It begins before dawn, that's first light in the morning, and it runs until after sunset at night. Different schools of Islam interpret sunset rather differently. Some say when the disk of the sun drops below the horizon, and some say when the reflected light of the sun is no longer visible. So you can have slight variations in the time of the ending of the fast. However, from before dawn in the morning until just after sunset, every day for 29 or 30 days during the month of Ramadan. The fast of Ramadan is a fast of total abstinence, nothing to drink, nothing to eat, and no sexual activity. This is not to suggest that these things are in any way bad. Quite the opposite. These are some of the most powerful urges that we have as human beings. So if you can control them, during the daylight hours during Ramadan, then you build a certain discipline, a certain backbone, so that you can resist other temptations as they come along in life. During the hours of darkness, of course, eating, drinking, and sexual relations with your marriage partner are quite permissible and are good things. As you could imagine, people rise early in the morning before dawn, and they drink plenty, and they eat slow-release, nourishing food, which is not salty, so as to make the day easier for them. And then you pass the whole day until sunset, and then you have the breaking of the fast. This is called iftar. It's important to know this because sometimes people are invited to Muslim families or to mosques. Come and share iftar with us. This is the breaking of the fast, and it is timed to the minute. So if it's 8 minutes past 6, then it's not 10 past, and it's not just after 5 minutes past, it's 8 minutes past 6, precisely. And traditionally, people will drink water or some other refreshing and nourishing drink at this time, and will eat some light food like fruit. It was the Prophet's practice to eat dates at this time. Now, before you can begin the day's fasting, you and God need to know what you're about. You need to declare your intention. Intention is niyyah. So you need to declare, this is my day of fasting. I offer it to God that God may accept it. In some schools of Islam, this should be done every day. Others will allow that one niyyah will cover the whole month of Ramadan. To understand Ramadan, we have to see it as discipline and not as torture. It's not about how tough you are, it's about how obedient you are. Because obedience to God is the principal duty of a Muslim. We are created to worship God and therefore to obey. So one is not allowed to extend the fast, for example. Your duty is to break the fast at the appointed time. Why fast? What's it all about? Well, first of all, it's an activity commanded by God for God's sake. It is an act of worship, an act of obedience to God in this way. It also has an impact upon the human being. I feel within my body the hunger that many human beings feel every day, not because they choose to fast, but because they have nothing to eat. It also reminds me that human life doesn't go on without the blessing and mercy of God. If God doesn't send the sun and the rain, nothing grows, and people go hungry. Now, for many people around the world, bad rainy season means a year in which they will go hungry. They don't have the buffer of the supermarket having lots of things in store. It reminds us also that we are dependent on God. Don't ever think that every breath you take, everything that you eat or drink, isn't the gift, the blessing of God. It reminds us also that our habits can be broken. People say, oh, well, I can't really work unless I have coffee at 11 o'clock in the morning. Yes, you can, because you are stronger than your habits. So it's about your habits being broken and the day, as it were, turned on its head in obedience to God's command. Sometimes in human life, we have to face hardships. Things don't go well, and we have to tough it out. And one of the benefits of the practice of Ramadan and fasting is that it helps us prepare to face those kind of hardships, so that we have got some strength in reserve to stick it out through the tough times. We are human beings. We live upon this earth. Therefore, we need to eat and drink in order to survive. But the angels don't. So part of Ramadan is also just saying, imagine what it would be like to live like an angel, to live without having to eat and drink and reproduce. So it helps to lift our thoughts to heavenly things. So it is a spiritual exercise and not just a physical exercise. Ramadan is also the month of the Quran, because it was during this month that the Quran was first started to be revealed and sent down to Prophet Muhammad. And therefore, during this month, Muslims make a special effort to hear recited, to recite themselves, to read for themselves the whole Quran. And the Quran is divided into 30 parts, so that one part can be read during each of the nights of Ramadan. Now, those who have memorized the whole of the Quran are called Hafiz or Hafiza if it's a woman, and they are in great demand during this month to recite Quran for others. There is a category of people who have mastered the art of recitation in a beautiful way. This is the Qari. Now, the Qari is in great demand for gatherings of people each night to recite 1/30 of the Quran in a beautiful way. The Sunnis have the practice of combining this recitation of the Quran with rak'ah, with prayers, so that they have what are called Taraweeh prayers. In the Shia tradition, the recitation of the Quran is done in groups, but people make the prayers privately instead of as a congregation together. Islam knows two different types of fasting. We have the fasting during Ramadan, which is communal. Everybody is fasting at the same time. You can see the strength of that because it means that people support one another. The whole of life is turned on its head. So in Muslim societies, it's quite common for people to go to work early in the morning. Soon after they have started fasting, they work through the morning, and then they stop work and go home and rest in the afternoon. And then quite often in the evening, after the fast has been broken, people will go back, offices are open, shops are open, so the whole structure of the day is turned on its head. The communal nature is important because it means that people do it together. They support one another. Young people gather around the older ones and they find their mutual support. Brothers and sisters will wake each other up early in the morning. Come on, get up early, have something to eat and drink, otherwise the day's fasting will be more difficult. But there's also a tradition in Islam of individual fasting. That is, an individual deciding that they will fast for the sake of God on a particular day or perhaps on a pattern of days. Some people will try to fast 1 or 2 days each week or 1 or 2 days each month. The Prophet himself had a pattern of fasting in this way. Fasting is also used to resist temptation. If I see myself pulled toward a particular sin and I want to resist it, then fasting is a way of building up that resistance. We can think, for example, of a young person devoted to study who can't marry because they're so devoted to their study and that's where their concentration must be. So fasting will be a way of resisting sexual temptations during this time. Fasting is also a way of making up for sins. Let us say somebody has made a promise to God to do something, and for some reason they've not been able to do it. Well, as a recompense, then people will fast, perhaps for a long period of time, a month, even 2 months. It's also a way of discerning the will of God. There is a special process of some days of fasting, certain prayers, and then consulting the Quran for guidance. So the combination of prayer and fasting can be important here as well. Ramadan is not just a negative month, a month of not eating and not drinking, of fasting. It's not just a month of the Quran, but it's a month as well in which one reviews the whole of one's life. How do I earn my living? Am I doing it in a way that builds up the community and is according to the guidance of God? How do I spend my money? How do I save my money? What is my pension fund doing today in my name? Do I play a proper part in the affairs of the community in which I live? Am I engaged in local social action, for example? How do I discharge my duties to my family? Am I spending enough time in study and in reading the Quran? Am I diligent in my prayers? Do I give enough in charity? Am I hoarding money? The month of Ramadan is a favorite time for Muslims to calculate the money that they owe to redistribute amongst those who are in need. This is zakat and khums. So often people will use this intensive month of the spiritual practice of Ramadan to make an honest and open assessment of these costs before God and then decide how they will transfer that money to the appropriate causes. Islam is always a balanced way of life. And so, as you would expect, certain people are exempted from fasting. People who are sick are exempt. People who are traveling a long distance. People who are too young or too old are exempt. Obviously, one has to make a decision to fast. So people who lack the mental capacity to make a decision like that, they don't fast during Ramadan. Women don't fast during the days of their period. If they are pregnant, if they are breastfeeding, it might be injurious to the health of the child that is developing within them to fast during this month. And so, again, they are exempt. Now, if one has missed some days because of a temporary thing, like traveling or sickness, then these days are caught up at a later period. People then decide when is the appropriate time to catch up these days themselves. If for some reason you can't fast, let's say that you've got a certain type of diabetes that demands regular intake of food during the day, then it would be injurious to your health to fast, so you don't. In this case, You join in the spirit of fasting by observing the other practices, and you give money to feed the poor, and in this way you join in that sacrificial act of supporting other people. When are you too old to fast? Well, each individual will make that decision for themselves, and don't try telling an elderly Muslim you're too old to fast. You might get a short answer. When are you too young to fast? That's a more difficult question. According to the Islamic law, one is required to fast from the time of puberty onwards. But lots of children growing up in Muslim families will want to join in the fast when they're much younger. And parents will say to them, well, you're not to fast during school days, for example, but you can join us fasting at the weekend. And in this way, they gradually break into the pattern of fasting, and also they can feel part of and join in the spirit of the whole month. Obviously, if keeping the fast during Ramadan is going to seriously injure your health, then you must break the fast, because preserving your life and your health is more important than observing the fast. And it may be that there are certain circumstances that occur that mean that you have to abandon a fast partway through the day. Let's say, for example, that one is an emergency surgeon and one's on a day off and is fasting, and there's a catastrophe of some sort and one is called in. Well, one may well need to break one's fast so that one can perform one's duties adequately. Islam is always flexible and sensible in this regard. This is a month of spiritual activity. It's a month in which people will devote themselves to extra prayers, to extra time of meditation and reflection upon the Quran. There is also a tradition that says that this is the month of the year when forgiveness of God is abundantly available. And so people will seek to make up any disputes that they have, anything that they've done wrong to offend other people. So Ramadan is a time of spiritual renewal so that one is then equipped to face the rest of the year. Indeed, one of my Muslim friends describes it as defrosting the fridge. The fridge always works better after you have defrosted it. And so in this way, through prayer, through fasting, through seeking forgiveness, one is spiritually elevated and purified to commence and work through the rest of the year. The last 10 days of Ramadan are especially important because it was on one of these nights, one of the odd-numbered nights toward the end of Ramadan, that the Quran was first sent down and first revealed to Prophet Muhammad. Many Muslims will keep the 27th night as what is called Laylat al-Qadr, the night of power or the night of destiny. Others will say it's not sure which of these nights it was, and therefore they will keep each of the odd-numbered nights in this last third of the month, and they will make a special effort of prayers and staying awake in the presence of God during this night. We're told that during the month of Ramadan, the gates of heaven are wide open. They are wide open for people to increase their spiritual bond with God, and also to be aware and listen to any message that God is speaking in their hearts. Conversely, we're told that the gates of hell are closed during this time. Satan is tied, so that there is less temptation during this time of Ramadan. It was a practice of Muhammad to spend time in seclusion so that he could devote himself to meditation and prayer. During the last 10 days of Ramadan, some Muslims will go into seclusion, ihtikaf, in the mosque, and they will spend all their time in prayer, in Quran reading, in meditation, and just join with the congregation at prayers, and obviously go to eat during the evening and to use the toilets and facilities, and then come back into their place of seclusion within the mosque. As you would expect, the first day after the month of Ramadan is a festival. It is called the Festival of Fast Breaking, Eid al-Fitr. This is celebrated by Muslim communities with great rejoicing, with games, with family gatherings, because this is thanksgiving for all the spiritual blessings during the month of Ramadan. So people will rise after dawn and they will have breakfast after the sun has come up, doing that which was forbidden during the month of Ramadan. And then there are special communal prayers. These will take place either in the largest mosques in the town or city, or in some places where the climate allows, people will gather in great open-air gatherings, and they will celebrate the Eid prayers there together. As you could imagine, there's presents for the children, new clothes are worn, people have a shower, put on their best things. It's a celebration activity. Before you can think of celebrating, though, what about your neighbours? What about the other people around you? How could you sit down to a big meal knowing that some neighbour of yours doesn't have enough money to buy food for this day? They don't have enough money to buy presents for their children. So before the end of Ramadan, it is a requirement that people make a special charitable contribution to those who lack the necessary money to celebrate the Eid. This is called Zakat al-Fitr. And this money is simply put discreetly through the letterbox of some family that one knows one needs it. And it's calculated on the basis of one meal for each of your family members, so that this will enable that family to celebrate too. Having done your duty to other people in this way by paying your charitable contribution, you are then at liberty to join with family and friends to celebrate the festival, not forgetting those who have died. So it's quite common that people will visit cemeteries on this day to go to give greetings to those who have died, so that they also are not forgotten. If you've missed any episodes of Understanding Islam, you can go to the Ahlulbayt website and you can see them there on the on-demand section. And remember that there's an article that goes with each of these episodes that can be downloaded from my own website. Join me next week when we'll be looking at the pilgrimage that unites all Muslims, the Hajj.